Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's devotional. Our thought today is going to come from the book of Ecclesiastes, written by King Solomon, also known as the wisest, at least the wisdom that is given to him by God, according to God. He was no one like him had ever come before nor after. And he used his wisdom in Israel to pass judgment and to lead his kingdom to the heights that of which for all time Israel would always be compared to the standard of what the kingdom of Israel was like under Solomon. And in particular, when we look at the book of Ecclesiastes, we see one word that comes up 38 times throughout the book, and that is vanity. And I want to take a look. We're not going to look at all 38 examples, but I want to take a look at all the things that Solomon says about vanity and ask ourselves, what is he talking about? So in verse 1 of Ecclesiastes, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem: "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it arose." He talks a little bit about basically the continuation of nature. And he says, "All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun." And then in verse 11, "There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who come after." And then in verse 14, he says, "I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind." In Ecclesiastes chapter 2 and in verse 1, "I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure, but surely this also was vanity." In verse 11, he says, "I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun." And this continues throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. In verse 19 of chapter 2, he says, "I hated all the labor," or starting in verse 18, "I hated all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. Who knows whether he will be wise or fool, yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity." And the term vanity means futile. It's pointless. There's no ultimate purpose or reward in it. And it's kind of interesting as you go through the book of Ecclesiastes how often that Solomon brings up the concept of vanity and futility. And when you read the whole book, especially all the way through, it leaves you with the impression that Solomon's saying that life is pointless. Nothing is worth anything. There is no reason to do anything. Why bother? Okay, and that's the impression that individuals sometimes come to the conclusion when they read Ecclesiastes, is that, well, what's the point of anything? But it's important to remember that all of Ecclesiastes is actually leading up to a point. There's a reason why he's going through all of this. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, and starting in verse 6, he says, "Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity." All of this, it's interesting because what he describes here, and of course, all of this is talking about aging. And he uses really interesting analogies to talk about aging. In verse 1, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth before the difficult days come, and the years draw near where you say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, the clouds do not return after the rain. This describes being able to see properly and being able to think clearly. And then the day when the keepers of the house tremble, talking about the hands trembling. Strong men bow down. As you age, you're not quite able to stand up as straight as you once were. The grinders cease because they're few, talking about teeth. Those that look through the windows grow dim, talking about the eyes. When the doors are shut in the streets and the sound of grinding is low, the concept of hearing. One rises up at the sound of a bird and all the daughters of music are brought low. Again, talking about hearing in the comparison to when one is young. Also, they are afraid of height and of terrors in the way. When the almond, because it's hard to move around, you can easily fall. When the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper is a burden and desire fails. For man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. And this is why he says twice. Well, he says here, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth. And then it's also implied here in verse 6. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, before death comes. And all of this leads up to verse 9. We're starting at verse 9. And moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-driven nails, given by one shepherd. Describing the need to teach, the need to share this information with everyone. He says the words of the wise are like goads, scholars are like well-driven nails. It builds up. It spurs people onward. And what's interesting to this is the fact that, well, if Solomon is talking about how vain life is, why does he say it's important to teach everybody? Why is it important to inform everybody? Isn't this depressing? I mean, isn't the point of Ecclesiastes to show how pointless life is? And yet he says the words of the wise are like goads. They spur people on. They give people a foundation. Well, what foundation is there if everything's vain? Well, this is the point in verse 13 and 14. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. This goes back to Ecclesiastes 1 verse 1. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. When I was young and I read through Ecclesiastes, I came to the conclusion that, well, life is pointless. Okay, of course, I didn't ask anybody about more detail or what the full lesson of Ecclesiastes was. I just read it myself and came to the conclusion, well, he's saying everything's pointless. I didn't realize, I didn't understand. I didn't have the maturity at that age to fully understand what Solomon was talking about. All of this book of Ecclesiastes, all of this wisdom, does it point out the futility of the physical world, the physical life? Yes, it does. But for a purpose, for a reason. You know, Solomon, and he even talks about here in Ecclesiastes, we've read some of it, how that he sought out to enjoy every possible pleasure. He sought out every possible thing he could, every treasure, everything that could be done on this earth at that time, he did. And he called it vain. And it was all to the point to show that ultimately our purpose on this earth isn't about this earth. It's not about the things of the world. It's about fearing God and keeping his commandments. That is our job. Because judgment will come and God will judge us. And that being the case, remember that the pursuing of things beyond God's commandments, things that would cause us to either do those things that he has not commanded or do those things that break his commandments, the temptations, lusts, falling after, seeking after the things that Solomon sought after, having an attitude of just not caring about God or caring about the Bible, or seeking to do just what I want to do and just not worrying about anything else. Solomon says that's vain. None of it has any point. None of it has any profit. Yes, that pleasure may last for a minute or 10 minutes. Even if it were to last for an entire lifetime, it wouldn't make it worth it. Because as he points out, in the end, everything dies. In the end, everything ends. Everything physical comes to an end. And his point is the only thing that matters in this world, the only thing that has lasting value, is fearing God and keeping his commandments. Now, certainly under the umbrella of fearing God and keeping his commandments, also there are the blessings that he gives us that we should enjoy. Certainly our families, our loved ones that we care about, that we enjoy spending time with, the moments of enjoyment we gain from the blessings God gives us, physical blessings that Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 6, that he gives us all things richly to enjoy. But to keep perspective, to remember that this world has nothing for us. In this world, there will be some joy, some pleasure that is provided under God's law. But ultimately, this world is sorrow. Nothing lasts in this world. This world is decay. And in the end, it will all end in this physical world. Therefore, make sure your focus, your perspective remains on fearing God and keeping his commandments. Because judgment will come. And no amount of enjoyment in this world, no amount of money or possessions or experiences in this world is going to change anything when it comes to judgment. And really, Ecclesiastes it's a beautiful book which reminds us of the importance of keeping our focus on heaven and reminding us that despite all the shininess of the world, all the allure that the world holds, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't last. And we have to remember that, especially in a society that is ever more material, ever more secular, not thinking about God, ever more about the experience of this life and feelings in this life. Those don't matter at all compared to the only thing that will last. That's the devotional for you today. Lord willing, our next devotional will be tomorrow, and hope to see you all then. Thank you, everybody.